Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Southern Dirt Motorsports. I'm Steve Winstead, along with my co-host, Mike Luna and Randall Davis. We are coming to you from Northfield Vineyards, 515 Ray Cemetery Road, Sparta, Tennessee. Come by sometime and check out their complete line of products, wine, hard cider, and for any of your events you might need, wedding events or whatever it might be, come by and check them out. Northfield Vineyards, 515 Ray Cemetery Road, Sparta, Tennessee. Randall, tell us a little bit about our guest today.
Thank you, Steve. You go to the races, you see this guy maybe sometimes he has to run hard, he has to fight for it. Sometimes he'll get out front and lead every lap, and then he gets all the glory. That guy sitting behind the steering wheel, he's the hero of the day. But you've got to remember, somebody made that car go fast for him to drive. You've got a guy that builds the car, sets the chassis, and you've got an engine builder. The engine builder has to know everything about that car for it to be successful. And our guest today, Tim Hartley, is one of the best in the business. He knows things about engines that, for me, for sure, I'll never live long enough to even know half of what he knows about engines. And with that, Tim, tell us, if you will, share with us how you got started in the race car engine building.
Well, I'd love to, and thank you all for having me today.
It's our pleasure.
You know, when I was young, I was always been a motorhead, and I always I liked anything with engines in it. And I started playing around with little stuff, camshaft stuff like that, and it wasn't until I thought I used to like drag racing, but it wasn't until I watched a NASCAR race on television. And I seen them guys build an engine that could run 500 miles wide open. And I said, I got to learn how to do that. And that was my drive to be able to learn to be able to do what I was able to accomplish today.
Well, before you actually build an engine, just so the folks know some of the things that goes into this, what do you have to know about what that guy's going to use this engine for, the type racing he's going to? What are a few of the things, I know it'd take a week probably to list all of them, what are a few of the things that you really have to know about to make that engine perform at the level that you want it to?
Type of track, type of vehicle, weight. We could sit here and name a lot of things. And the driver. I mean, the driver means an awful lot. Absolutely. A dirt track engine is different than an asphalt engine, is different than a drag race engine, is different than a tractor engine. I mean, they're all different. So we got to use our knowledge to try to give him the best we can possibly give him.
Okay, tell us one of the few differences. I know you can't tell us all of them. Tell us one of the few differences if you were going to race at a Sparta's track, which would be a quarter-mile dirt, and then the difference in what racing at Eldora would be like.
The old Eldora?
Yes.
Okay. Torque. I'd change camshaft. I'd keep the compression up, but I'd change camshaft because we're geared to different racetracks. Baxter, a lot of people said Baxter was a motor-eating track, but I didn't think so. I always thought Eldora was harder on an engine than the Baxter was. Camshaft, but tires have a lot to do with it too. I mean, we have races that have tire rules, and we've got to meet those. We can blow the tires off, or we can let the driver not blow the tires off. You know, the engine builder can build an engine to make it easier on the driver if we have all the facts and figures in front of us.
Well, Baxter too was a track that you could keep a lot of RPM in the engine right, going into the turns and coming out. They didn't get to breathe a lot. In Eldora, you stretched them out. There was a very, very short time that you could. They got a blurt, and that was about it.
That was about it.
And I assume you would be looking for a lot of torque at Sparta.
Absolutely.
And you'd have to have a wider power band than at Eldora than you would at a speedway like Sparta.
And that's something else. I'm glad you mentioned power band. A lot of people want to run outside that power band. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And like if we knew we was going to, if we were going to crank an engine up there, high, then we want to make that camshaft to meet that RPM band. And we were talking earlier that, you know, sometimes that power off with compression helps slow that car down. Those are some other issues that's critical about putting one together.
You look at too, I think, the length of races this motor is going to be used in. You can treat one a lot rougher if it's going to be running 25 lap features than you can if it's going to be running a 200 lap races, so on and so forth. Wouldn't you think?
In a way. Valve spring. We always ran 800 lap valve spring because the weakest link of the motor has always been the valve spring. If the motor is clearanced right, and if the motor's balanced right, and you've got a motor is nothing more than an air pump, but it has to be, the numbers have to be right. And if you've got the numbers, then the motor's going to wear. I mean, it's going to last. But the weakest link, of course, is the valve spring. So it was critical to us to always make sure we've kept valve springs up to speed on these engines because they live longer if we got good valve springs in them.
And I know you'll remember this. I know the 348s and the 409s were the first big blocks that Chevy had. The valve springs, after people learned that, was the weakest link in them also.
Absolutely.
Those engines was notorious for blowing after about 6,000 RPM, but it was the valve springs that was actually causing those engines to blow once they figured that out.
If you think about it, that valve goes up and down. And when that valve seats, if it bounces, you lose compression, which is loss of power. So you got to keep a valve spring, and when that valve goes shut, that spring's got to hold that valve shut so it doesn't lose compression, which it makes power. It's that simple.
Okay, now that we've put some basics out there, now we'll probably have to get back in this because engines are my passion too. They
Good
always,
deal. Good deal.
They always have been. But talk to us a little bit about some of the people that you've built engines for that they're going to recognize, and that way they'll know that old Tim Hartley had a lot to do with their success. Now,
Well, I don't know if I had a lot to do with anybody's success.
Yes, you did.
But we've been honored and privileged enough to build some pretty good daggone engines over the year. And Mike's sitting right here. Mike was telling me, I didn't know that the little engine we built him lasted as long as it did. And he won a lot of races with it.
I've heard about that little engine a lot.
Yeah.
Mike and I have had
Tell
we've
us
had a
about that
lot of
engine.
conversation about that engine.
Tell us about
Actually,
that.
it was really started out was going to build it limited rules for my son Michael. Well, we had I don't remember. I think maybe we broke a valve spring or something and pulled the engine, and we just put that one in there because we was probably the hottest part of the summer, you know, and we thought we could do pretty good. Never dreamed it would do what it did, but we outrun Terry English with that engine at Hohenwald. It's won races at Hohenwald and Kentucky and just almost everywhere we took it, it won. And Tim, but not just me, Tim's done a lot of engines like for, he done one that won the Battle of the Bluegrass race.
Back to back.
And
who was that for?
Greg Johnson.
Greg Johnson, and which later became Lucas. That's what Lucas is now. Lucas bought Battle of the Blues. So it, you know, at the
That's
time
something
it was
to really be proud of.
it was a big deal.
That was a big deal.
Big deal. So Tim, I'd put him up against anybody, but hey, I never thought he got the credit that he really deserved.
Hey, most time the engine builders and car builders don't get the credit they deserve, and crew chiefs don't either. But it takes all of that to make a winner. A driver, he gets to enjoy a lot of it, and he's one sticks his neck out a little bit. But the guys behind the scenes are the ones like Tim here, are the ones that really makes that happen. They give you the equipment that you need to do that with. Some of the bigger races maybe that somebody has won with your engines. Tim, can you share some of those and where were they? And
Well, the Battle of Bluegrass races were pretty big races for us. I got to be part of building the David Gilliland engine that won the very first Kentucky Motor Speedway Busch race. I did the bed plate work on that engine. I did the head work on that engine, and I picked the camshaft out on that engine to build. So that was pretty cool. But all those big races were important, but even the smaller races were important to me. I enjoyed it. My self-satisfaction was seeing guys win with my stuff. It just made my, you know what I'm saying?
Well, sometimes the smaller races or smaller name races are harder to win than some of the
Right,
some of the bigger ones.
Some of them
are.
local boys.
So, the most notorious battles you have are on local tracks, and that's why a local guy is a harder guy to beat than somebody
I totally agree with
coming
that.
in, because he knows where all the humps and bumps are, and the new guy has to find them.
Yes.
Did you, in your engine building business, did you own your own machining? Did you do that yourself? Or,
It started out. Another company had bought the equipment, and I helped order that equipment. And then he sold it to another guy, and I went with the equipment because that's what I wanted to do. And then I ended up buying all the equipment and moving in and doing it on my own. And that was a blessing right there. That was where I got to do it the way I wanted to do it. And I didn't have to. I got free reins.
I know when you're in the racing business, any kind of competition, whatever you get into in this sport, there's always one out there that means a little more to you, maybe, or when you think about some of the things you've accomplished, this comes to mind. Share with us, if you will, one of those. I know probably with you it can't be just one, but there's got to be one or two that stands out in your mind that really meant a lot to you, to see your engine go out there and really perform like it did.
I know you guys are going to think I'm crazy, and I may be wrong for saying this.
Most of us are, for being in the sport to start with.
But the Chevette racing, I know that was the lowest class racing there was, but we put on a $600 to win racing at Baxter one time. And these guys came from Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana. They was more Chevettes you ever seen in a life. And one of our engines won that $600, and that was that was the best experience I think I ever had.
Who was driving that car?
Ron Dotson.
Okay.
He's no longer with us, but he sure put her out there and let her rip.
Well, Chevette racing was a big.
It was a big deal in this area at one time.
It really was.
And it made the engine builders go to work, because you couldn't buy parts for a Chevette. You had to come up with your own combinations, and it allowed us to really dig and
it was like the good days, old days,
like
I guess.
Like the old flathead day. That's
You
exactly
tried some to see if it worked. Some of it did.
Some of it did. Some of it didn't.
Some of it you had to scratch your head and wonder why I thought that would work to start with.
Chevette engines had Pontiac valves, 2300 lifters. I mean, you name it. It was made of all kinds. Honda rods. You name it. It had all kinds of stuff in it.
Mike, that's the class that Stephen run in, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Chevette?
Yes, it was,
Stephen.
absolutely.
Yeah.
He's our editor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's,
absolutely. Stephen made us work for our money. Absolutely.
he's a good racer.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
can't say enough good about Stephen. He takes what we do
He
here
is-
and makes it really look good.
Well,
Yeah.
Stephen Fields made us work for our money.
He's another one that
As a matter
really.
of fact, I built an engine for Stephen when I first was getting started. I forgot all about that. I've got pictures over there, I believe. Of that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Stephen, we don't never give him the credit he deserves
No.
either. He's been a
He
true
won a lot of
blessing.
Chevette races.
He's an unsung hero.
He was
Leslie.
the one that went,
Yeah.
when I first started going down there, he was the one that you had to beat.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
spent a lot of time talking to Stephen too about his engines and some things he did.
Yeah.
It's remarkable and almost unbelievable, some of the
Very
things that he
creative.
did.
You had to be.
He
You had to
was.
be
He's a-
creative in that engine.
He's a really, really good thinker.
Tim actually he'd built some engines for Jonathan Davenport,
Yeah.
and he won I think over $2 million last
He
year.
won $1 million in one race last
Yeah,
year.
he won over $2 million last
did.
year, and Tim had built his.
I built
How
that
did
engine.
you get connected with him, Tim?
Through K&J, he was from the same town that Steve Allen was from, and Steve was working with us over at K&J, and Steve had mentioned, he says, "I've got a driver, and we've got a car here. Let's put a motor together and let's let this boy get in his car." And it was Jonathan Davenport came over and got in that car, and I forgot about Jonathan. That's how he got his start, more or less. Was in the K&J house car, one of our engines. That was pretty cool.
Did he win some races?
He won some races, but not locally, North Carolina, where he's from. He won some races in that car.
In that car?
Yes.
What is some of the different states and places that your engines is running one in, Tim?
Oh gosh, guys, I got to tell you a real quick story about an out of state. We went to the Talladega dirt track in November. What they call that, the ice
Bowl.
Ice Bowl. We built a reverse rotation 362 cubic inch SB2 motor for Billy Moyer out of Missouri.
I know about Billy.
And we went down there to watch that race, and we built a reverse rotation motor. And our theory, we tried to be chassis men, I guess. Our theory was when going around the corner, if it reverse rotation, it would plant to the left front tire and help turn the car. So we got down there, and it was muddy that day. It was they had the farmers selling bales of hay to keep the guys from laying on the wet ground. Anyways, we get down there and look down it, and they had the hood off of it. Look down there, and he had a transfer case on behind that motor. And I said, guys, let's go back. This just defeated everything we did. So we went back to the motel room. Didn't even stay for the race.
There was another guy that I got to spend some time with that did that same thing. He was old Smokey Unick. You ever heard of him?
Oh, absolutely. Smokey Unick
He,
was the very first man that laterally gas-ported pistons.
Yes, and he built one of those reverse rotations with about the same results.
I remember I was in high school when that came out in the Hot Rod magazine. One of the kids come in there and said, "Oh, this guy's bored holes in the piston." I'm thinking, there ain't nobody bore holes in the piston, but he laterally gas ported the top ring, and we did this with all of our motors with laterally gas ported. Absolutely.
It sealed those things up.
Oh, the compression when it comes up on the compression stroke, the compression will get behind the ring, tighten the ring up, and you wouldn't lose any compression.
You didn't have all that steam.
You didn't have nothing running back in that motor. No, there was no positive crankcase pressure from them motors.
That's what I call it anyway, was steam.
Do you have any good Larry Corey stories?
Larry Corey, I gotta
he was
tell
a
you,
Character.
Larry Corey was something else. I got to know Larry Corey through a real estate agent here in town, a good friend of mine, Roger Allen. And Larry decided, he was a drywall, and he decided he wanted to go super late model racing, and he was blowing engines up as fast as he could get them. Now it wasn't because his engines was bad, but Larry couldn't drive. I mean, this was way over his head, but he wasn't going to quit. And finally, he had just about bankrupted himself, and he says, "Tim," he says, "I need help." He says, I said, "Larry, bring me everything you got left over, and I'll see what I can put together." And I found a halfway decent crankshaft that we could turn down, and I found 8 good rods that matched weight-wise, and we put him in an old motor together, and that old motor lasted for him a long time. But I did put a chip in his MSD box so he couldn't over-rev it, and I never told him nothing about that.
That's a good way to protect a guy from
Exactly.
himself. Did you build mostly GM engines, or did you build anything that a guy brought you?
I like doing some of the Ford stuff because that was back then when they came out with the N head, which was a 10 degree Ford head. You could put it on an open wheel car and lay that valve open 10 degrees.
Was this a Windsor type engine?
It was absolutely.
Okay, I thought I had heard about that.
Absolutely. See,
method
instead of being a 22 degree or 21 degree head, the N head, and the only way you could tell it, take the valve cover off, there's a big N in there, the cast it in there. It looked on the outside, looked just like a stock head.
Well, the LS engine it's really a combination of Ford and everybody.
But I tell you what,
it's like you took the best of everything and put in that one engine.
When Chevrolet come up with the LS engine, they took the best. They took the Mopar. They've got it all in one engine today.
It's a little
That's
bit
exactly
of the best
right.
of everything, in my
Yes.
opinion.
Yeah, you're absolutely all over it. Yes.
Are you doing any dirt engines now?
I just got done with a Dart LS block and Dart heads. It hadn't been out on the track yet, but I believe it's going to be one of the nicest ones we've ever put together. I truly believe that. It's a real motor.
I like to ask guys that's in the business that you're this. I know different tracks, a lot of tracks are trying to save money with crate engines, and some of them 9-to-1 engines. Share with us what your thoughts on what would be a money-saving type engine to the everyday racer, the backyard racer. what could we do, or what could tracks do, a set of rules that they could invoke that would make engines cheaper for the everyday guy? There's no cheap engine out there.
Well,
Cheaper.
The crate engine, and I'm looking at it as an engine builder, the crate engine was a great idea. It was a great idea. It would put everybody on the same playing field, cost the same amount of money for everybody. But the only problem is everybody wanted to change them. And it's hard to police something like.
It really is.
And all they're doing is valve spring. It's the valve spring. It's always the valve spring.
Sometimes crate engines too get out of the price range of what a guy with a little ingenuity can do too. So its objective was, I think, to try to contain cost, when in reality sometimes it ran the cost up on some local guys that couldn't invest that much at one time. And most local guys were all alike. You're racing on a pretty tight budget anyway.
You could take a stock. Now this was before the LS, of course. You could take they used to say you wanted a 4-bolt main block, but that theory was way out. As far as I'm concerned, that theory was way out off left field. A good 2-bolt main block that was had good bolts in it was as strong as any 4-bolt main block ever was. But that was a budget way to go. And you could run a 23-degree head on it, and those motors made pretty good power.
I know people, some engine builders at least, they overlook the importance of the line bore.
That's the move.
And that is going to really determine the longevity of an engine, is how good the line bore is in it. Any
engine comes in the shop, the very first, before it gets washed, before it gets cleaned, before it gets anything, that line hone is checked on it. Because if that's out of spec, you're out of spec your whole. That's like the foundation of a home. You don't put a daggone house on a wooden foundation. You have a good concrete foundation, and that block and that line bore has to be straight. If it ain't going to oil right. You get one main bearing carrying the load, and it's going to fail. That's exactly. And that's what happens. Guys, I'm going to share something that's so simple with these motors that most people don't think about. If you've got a V8 engine and you've got 2 rods together, right? You've got two rods. And when you're tightening that motor down, you reach up there and you draw that torque wrench down, you tighten that rod bolt at 63 or 45, whatever. You've done more damage to that rod right there than you can imagine. Think about that. Now, I want you to think of it this way. If you've got, say, 8 thousandths gap between the 2 rods, okay? We're just imaginary numbers now. But your oil clearance on that rod is, say, 2 thousandths. So when you've pulled that against that 8 thousandths, what have you done? You crushed that bearing. That's why you want to run a feeler gauge, lock those 2 rods down, then pull it. You haven't. I've seen more motors taken apart and seen oil would run on half the bearing, and on down here it run on this half.
You twist the bearing.
You daggone right, you mash the bearing, and it's obvious when you take them apart.
Well, Tim, will you stick around and do a part 2 with us?
I guess I'll do whatever you got. You've got me for as long as you want me, I reckon.
With that, we're going to bring conclusion to this episode of Southern Dirt Motorsports. Tim, appreciate you coming.
I appreciate y'all having me.
And for my co-host, Mike Luna, Randall Davis, thank you for joining us. And please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And also remember, Southern Dirt Motorsports, Tennessee's first dirt track podcast devoted entirely to dirt track racing. Thank you.